Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Estate Investing Real Talk with your hosts, Sherwin G.
And Tyler J. Every time.
Oh, sorry, I don't know
Uh,
where you're. Yeah.
I love it. So cool episode today. We did not do a
Yep.
quick chat. We actually brought in one of my good friends, Ernesto Hernandez, who is a
Yep.
real estate agent in the Bay Area. And I love that guy. I admire him. He's very knowledgeable, very well spoken. He's been in the industry as an agent only for about a year, but I love his story because there's synergies between what you, Sherwin, and Ernesto went through in terms of, getting laid off during COVID, but then taking that as an opportunity to progress your career in real estate. So really fun episode. I know Ernesto had a lot of great knowledge bombs and tips to bring up specifically about the Bay Area market. But Sherman also goes into his story about how he was trying to sell his single family home this summer as well.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great little chat to sort of talk about my experience of listing my single family home in this crazy market and getting kind of Ernesto's kind of take on my experience and his take on sort of the current market. And what's great is that he's a real estate investor who's a real estate agent.
Yep.
So he already has that kind of mindset working. So it was a great episode. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah. Have a good time. Enjoy it. Boom.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Real Talk show. Did I get that right?
I think you got it right.
Sherwin G.
I'm Tyler, and we have a special guest today. One of my good friends, Ernesto Hernandez. We met years ago when we both were interested in investing in the Indianapolis market. And I just remember, I think, Ernesto, we connected on maybe Bigger Pockets or something like that. But glad to have you here. Thank you for your time. Really good colleague of mine, super knowledgeable, and he loves to teach. So I think he's going to be a super great guest today. And he just started getting into the real estate agent kind of world about a year ago, having, come from just a pure investment standpoint. Plus he worked for a telecommunications company. But Ernesto, thank you for hopping on today. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, it's funny how we met, Tyler. We did meet through Bigger Pockets, and I remember we exchanged some messages, and then we had a meetup at my place. If you remember that one.
It was like a date, basically.
Wait, was it just you two?
No, it was like a group.
Okay, so it wasn't a date.
I have been to his place though solo. He did invite me back when you were living on San Pablo.
I did. Yeah, so Tyler and I met through our own kind of pursuits in Indianapolis and realized we were both local, had a lot in common, and we just started hanging out. And yeah, I was laid off early last year, so 2020, February 25th, I think was the date. But I was like hoping and praying for that. I was miserable in my W-2 job, and I got a severance package. So a lot of my coworkers knew it was coming. I actually like manifested my severance package because a lot of people on my team knew that by the end of 2021 I was not going to be there anymore. So I had already started getting prepped to be a realtor. And then when I got that call that I was getting laid off, I was like ecstatic, and they were confused. I'm like, oh, no idea. So yeah, and now I'm a realtor full time. I've been licensed again since February of last year, and I've been at it for about a year and a half here in the Bay Area. I live in the East Bay, but I lived in San Francisco for 25 years, so I know San Francisco super duper well. And I focus mostly in Contra Costa County because that's where I live, but I've helped people buy and sell pretty much everywhere. So that's me.
What were you doing before real estate that you got laid off?
I was with
job.
Yeah, I was with Verizon Wireless. I had done different roles. I started off as a sales rep and worked my way up. At the last role that I had, I basically had a territory of locations that I oversaw. So it was actually pretty easy work, to be honest with you. But it was just really unfulfilling, and just corporate culture. I think the biggest thing I learned is that I'm probably not a good employee. Like that's the reality. So
it's so funny. So there's so many similarities to that story to me, because then I got let go in 2020 on March 23rd. I know exactly the date too, just like you. But I was already halfway out the door, and my daughter was born January 1st of 2020. So I was kind of like using her as an excuse to maybe I'm not going to go back to work. And, COVID hit, and, my boss called me, let me go. And it was funny because it was a weird feeling because it felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I was kind of happy, and then I was kind of scared, and I was kind of happy again. And I was like, oh, this is probably the best thing because I got a nice severance package, and I got to, spend more time at home with my newborn daughter and my kids and so forth. So, that's great. I mean, I guess that's good and bad, but it's good because if you didn't get let go, you won't even be where you're at right now, right? So
ultimately great. I mean, I've just seen, and me, like, just seeing externally, seeing kind of how you guys have progressed as like humans, and well, that's a very broad term there, as people. But just in your careers too, I've literally seen how, Sherwin, your business has grown, and Ernesto, seems like you're crushing it in the real estate world these days, and now you are fully surrounded by real estate, which I think I've seen as like one of your biggest passions. So it's been cool to see that transition. I've been rooting for you, man. I remember we used to call each other sometimes routinely, and it was always like, oh, I'm gonna quit my job soon. I'm gonna quit my job soon, and then it finally happened. So, but it was the best scenario because you got that severance package. So, congrats to you, man.
Yeah. And I got a little bit of like, the California like EDD like stimulus.
Oh yeah, you got everything.
Yeah.
It was like perfect. So,
so I was gonna say, go for it.
I was just gonna say I'm super grateful that it happened when it did, how it did. It was literally perfect.
Yeah, I love it. And so the reason why we kind of wanted to bring Ernesto on today is because he has knowledge in the Bay Area market, California market, and Sherwin, you kind of mentioned in past episodes that you're going through a little bit of a interesting scenario here with one of your single family homes, and you have a home in Oakland that you put on the market 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, it was in early August when I put it on the market. August. And Tyler, we were talking about it'd be kind of great to sort of share my experience with our viewers or listeners. And on top of that, it'd be great having Ernesto's kind of expertise, him being a realtor, him in the Bay Area, to sort of maybe just have this conversation of like what I went through, and if he's seeing the same thing or vice versa, so just kind of sharing that, because there might be people out there thinking about maybe listing their home, and nurse might be like, no, don't do it now, or maybe do it, I don't know. But this is sort of like my experience during this crazy kind of volatile market.
So let's hop into it, man. Why don't you give everyone like the background of from A to Z, what happened?
Yeah, so this was my I used to live in a home. This is in Oakland, in like sort of like I guess sort of like the Oakland Hills, but not quite, whatever. But this is I got the home in 2016, and I moved out in 2020 and rented it. So it was a rental property. So I had tenants in there, I had residents in there currently, and I was actually trying to hint at them that, hey, I wanted to sell sooner because the past year or two real estate was pretty hot, right? I mean, during COVID, you think the real estate would have crashed and burned, but it actually went up. Property values went up. So I really wanted to exit and take advantage of the higher property values and the lower interest rates. That was like 3%, almost like subpar, like almost 2%, right? Because there was a lot of demand when COVID hit, because I think people realize, oh, I don't really like where I'm living right now. I need a bigger place, or I hate living with my mom, or I hate living with my roommate, or yada, 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 right? So I really want to take advantage of it. But, the residents weren't ready to leave, which is fine. That's their right and everything. So I had to wait until they gave me notice, I think, around like July or so, that they're going to leave in early August. So I said, okay.
Of this year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this year. Yep. So it was sort of that, I guess maybe that, I don't know if peak time of like, oh, interest rates are kind of rising, but are they going to rise more or less or not? So, my wife and I had this dilemma. Okay, what do? We know we want to sell. So we're like, is this the right time to do it? And, we sort of came up, I sort of thought like 3 reasons why we decided to list and sell our house in this crazy market. And right away, I think they let us know, like, I think on the Monday they left, and literally that weekend we had the open house. So my agent, who's actually my aunt, I was working her, and I was telling her, do we need to stage the house? Do we need to paint the house? Because there are still some, some damages on the wall that we need to paint. She's like, her reason is like, no, let's just get it on the market right now, right? And there's two reasons why we did it. Like we kind of rushed to kind of like get it on the market without staging it, without even painting it. And the first reason was because we want to sell the home before this market crash. The economy was kind of volatile, and we wanted to get out before things worsen. And plus winter was coming up, and it's a little bit harder to sell a home, during the winter time because nobody wants to move their rent. So we wanted to get that right away. The second reason was that we're still hoping that there are still buyers out there who wanted to act before interest rates rose. Interest rates was rising and rising, but we were hoping there's still demand out there, that buyers were still looking for homes and they wanted to get in the home before interest rates got any higher. So that's why we're like, let's hurry up, get this on the market, get this on the MLS. And the third reason, and probably the most important reason why we want to sell was because my wife and I will be exempt from capital gains tax because we lived in the home 2 out of the 5 years. So we're kind of like in the deadline. We have to sell by, I think, next year, May, before, we get hit by capital gains tax. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to sell. And that's probably the main reason why we want to exit. Because if not, then we probably would have just, maybe kept it, and rent it out and so forth. But those are like the kind of 3 main reasons why we wanted to, list and sell this market. And, Ernesto, I don't know if you have any feedback of if you have clients now thinking about listing and their reasons why, and, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as why people were still selling, my whole thing is, and I don't want it to come off as like insensitive, because when people hear it, it's like, oh, really? But I personally,
this is real talk, Ernesto. This is real talk.
Real talk.
Hey,
real talk.
Yeah.
I'm not super active on TikTok, but when I was, this was one of my more like engaged with videos. And my whole thing is I don't really care about interest rates. And the reason why I don't is because like, I'm not going to have my head in the sand and make it seem like it's the same market for sellers that it was a year ago. A year ago, there was 3% interest rates. Things hadn't cratered in the economy as much. And it was just a free for all, right? One thing that we have to be mindful of in the Bay Area is my observation is that the market was heavily tech employer driven. And so when we went into COVID lockdown and these companies let their employees work from really wherever they wanted, or even now, right? Apple and I think Facebook have announced you only have to come back to the office 2, maybe 3 days a week. At that point, you know what? Getting a huge house in Sacramento, Stockton, Lathrop, right? That becomes doable for people. So at the end of the day, people will still have to buy and people will still have to sell. The last buyer client that I got on a contract at 7.9% interest, which is really high, right? So then why did they move? Well, they moved because their commute was crazy. They were commuting from Modesto to Concord. The husband wasn't sleeping with his wife 3 nights a week. There's always, I don't believe that humans, especially Americans, are like economists. And I think sometimes we think that, right? But you look at how we spend our money and how we manage like our finances. I don't think the typical buyer or seller, and I've never, an exercise that I did is I like to go back and interview my clients and find out, why did you move? Why did you buy? Why did you sell? And I've never had someone say, well, I was watching the market and I felt like I was going to perfectly, right? Life events will always cause people to buy and sell. And I will say from the listing side, I think of my last, few listings. The current one that I have is a flipper. So, okay, he has to sell regardless, ASAP. I had a 70-year-old woman who lived in a 3-story house. That's tough at 70, right? To go that many years. I had another lady who also downsized from a condo, not downsized. She went from a condo with 2 stories. She's already using a walker. So my point is there's always going to be personal reasons why people will have to buy and sell. The market has slowed down depending on what reporting you look at. Sales are down 20-30% versus last year. But that's still a pretty good percentage of people that are still buying and selling houses regardless of market conditions. So people are going to buy and people are going to sell whenever they're ready or whenever life calls them to. So that's my perspective.
There's this phrase I heard a while back where the best time to buy or sell real estate is the best time for you.
And it's true.
And you put it to a point, Ernesto, where there are deals out there. There's a lot of people I know that are waiting on the sidelines, trying to hoarding cash, waiting for that next deal because there's no deals out there. But like you said, I never thought about like there's that 70-year-old lady who really needs to move now because she has a 3-story house, and regardless of rates or whatever, it's a personal thing where she needs to get out into a better living situation than she is now. So they're out there. You just kind of search it out and weave it out. And, they're maybe more motivated now, especially if they're listing this environment of high interest rates, right? Where people are like, why are you listing now? But like you said, like a flipper, I have some friends who flip homes, who got homes like, a year or two ago when they underwrote it to sell 2 years later, not knowing the market is going to be at its current market. So now they're having a hard time to refinance. So they have to sell or at a loss, because they have no choice, because they can't carry that note over, or else, they're going to get hit with that big, one-time payment and so forth. So yeah, it's super interesting. Yeah.
As I say, the other piece to me is also if you have a more of a long-term vision and goal, if with a purchase, yes, interest rates are high, but if you can afford that payment now, that's great. And there's obviously the hope and thought that interest rates will eventually come back down. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do feel like rates will come back down eventually, where you could maybe have an opportunity to refinance. And then also with the higher interest rates right now, like we were seeing price reductions, and so maybe you pick up a house that's a little bit at a discount, and your mortgage is now a smaller amount. So there's obviously I guess the point is that there's no right or wrong time to buy, as long as you have a similar a certain vision or goal or need to buy. So,
and I will say for buyers, a couple things. It is now a lot more doable to get some of these like first-time home buyer programs, getting your offers accepted, right? A year ago, it was very difficult because those programs typically come with certain strings attached or extra hoops that you have to jump through. And so the escrow takes longer, right? So if there's an apples to apples offer, like the identical offer, but one of them can close in 14 days and it's pretty clean, the other one takes 35, 40 days because they're using their first-time home buyer program. Well, to the seller, that's going to be a little bit more risky. So for people using some of these down payment assistance programs or things like an FHA loan, right, or VA loans that come with these additional strings that sellers normally don't like right now, it's a lot more likely to get your offer accepted with those things, which I think is good. Secondly, we're seeing more like contingent offers get accepted, and not even offers with contingencies, but like, hey, I'm going to buy your place contingent on me selling mine. A year ago, you'd get laughed at. Like, there's no way we're going to do that. And now we are seeing those things. So, and lastly, I will say there's different ways around interest rates, like, and where they are. There's different programs that I'm aware about. There's different strategies, and maybe we can circle back to some of those. But in Oakland specifically, anyone listening in Oakland should know of, so there's a local bank called First Republic. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of them.
Yeah.
First Republic has phenomenal rates. So they have two different programs that I like. One of them, if you're just a traditional kind of conventional buyer and you're really well qualified, they ask for at least 20% down. Their interest rates are always about 1.5 to 2 below where the market is. So if you can do the 20% down, that's awesome. And that's where we as listing agents have to be mindful of that as we're fielding offers, letting the buyer's agent know, hey, I'm not sure if you knew this or not. So there are ways around that there's things like interest rate buy downs. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with those. Yeah. So there's the permanent buy downs. There's 2-1 buy downs where your interest is 2% lower year one. So there's like those different strategies. My biggest thing for sellers is that you just have to recognize that buyers are more picky. It's not that they're not buying. It's that they are picky. So depending on traffic, it may take a little bit longer. A recent listing that I had sat on the market for longer than I thought that it would. It was a really good part of Concord, super popular. It's a little neighborhood called Turtle Creek. I thought we'd be in contract in 2 to 3 weeks at most. It took us 42 days to get it in contract. Now, why did I not do a price drop? Because our traffic was actually steady. I'm monitoring our open house traffic. I'm monitoring the number of showings that are happening during the week. I can see through that how many realtors are showing that house. I'm like, we have plenty of traffic. It's only a matter of time. And eventually that's how it worked out. So for sellers, you got to come correct. Like, trust me, I did a lipstick on a pig flip earlier this year in Lodi. I would not be able to get away with that today. So it's just buyers are more picky. Like they're still out there, but they're going to go look at every other house and then they'll come back to yours if yours is really a good one.
That's a good segue to like what I want to talk about next. It was sort of like, my house was listed. It's on the MLS. It's on the market. And, what I've learned as a seller during this whole experience, with my home being listed. So I learned like 5 things, right? And you kind of like touch into some of those 5 things where like, first thing I learned was that, there was traffic and there was a lot of interest And we could tell because, as you mentioned, my realtor was tracking showings in the middle of the week and open houses. There was a good amount of traffic and the amount of disclosures that got downloaded. As a realtor, you can see how many people download the disclosure. So there was a lot of traffic. So there was still demand there, sort of like mid-August, sort of like the month of August when I listed this property, right? And a lot of people toured it. And the second thing that I learned was, and you touched that, was that buyers are a lot more particular about what they desired. So some of the feedback we got was, oh, the yard was too much square footage and we don't want to do that much yard work. Or, I wish we had bigger rooms or bigger space. Where I remember when I was like, bought this home in 2016, when wife and I were looking at homes in Oakland, we were happy that the kitchen had a kitchen sink. We're like, oh, no, kitchen sink, that's a bonus. Let's go. Right. So now they're a little bit more picky, and you like knocked on the put on the head to when you said, buyers are more picky. They're looking around, surveying around, looking at a lot of different houses. And they have that luxury now because houses are staying in the market a lot longer versus like a couple of years ago. You got to act in a week or two or else boom, you're gone. So now they have that luxury to kind of like shop around for a little bit, because that house may stay in the market for a little bit longer. Right. And, sort of like the third thing I learned was that, the media was just instilling like way too much fear in the real estate market. So people were kind of just scared, just kind of waiting and seeing what's going to happen. Even though our house was, we thought was reasonably priced, and it was just more of a timing issue of when we listed it, right? In this sort of like the beginning of the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, right? And the fourth thing that we learned was like similar to like the last reason was, buyers were just concerned with the economic situation. What's the Fed going to do to reduce inflation? Are they going to raise rates? Are they not going to raise? And I'm not sure if you were sort of guiding your clients, say, hey, let's just wait, let's see what happens before you buy, yada yada yada. But that's sort of what we sort of learned. And the last thing that we learned was sort of going back to like the down payment that you talked about. Was I was talking to a loan officer, and he mentioned that a lot of people were just waiting for the stock market to recover because, they were truly anticipating a market crash. So they were like, okay, let's just hold off. And a lot of buyers are actually relying on their 401k or their stock options to use for a down payment. But what happened was stocks dropped, their down payment, their buying power dropped, and their down payment, and they couldn't afford that normal down payment now, especially in this crazy market where interest rates are so high and so forth. So those were sort of like the 5 things that I kind of learned, like, hey, people, there's demand was out there, but they were just kind of like waiting and seeing and without doing any moves, so.
That actually, I didn't think about that, but I'm curious, Ernesto, do you have a lot of clients that essentially just they use their stock portfolio or retirement accounts to fund that down payment? I always, for me, it's always just I accumulate cash and then use it as a down payment. But I tend to keep my stock portfolio like separate from my real estate stuff. So I'm curious, like, do you have a lot of clients that use their portfolio in other areas to fund that down payment?
I personally have not had experience with that. I know that there are certain banks that will take into consideration your crypto balance, right?
Oh,
so
interesting.
That was once upon a time a pretty hot topic. Less now that crypto's cooled down significantly. And then some banks were also considering or taking into account a lot of these tech employees have like those RSU shares, right? Restricted stock units. So it's like they're taking into account the future
potential.
What's the word?
Value.
There's a date at which it matures.
A vesting period.
Vested.
Okay, vesting. Yeah. So certain banks were taking that into consideration as well. Okay, you don't have it now, but 7 months from now, you are going to be able to cash out those RSUs or whatever. So, hey, we're going to go ahead and factor that into your underwriting. I think that comes into play more so like kind of tech centric areas for buyers. I think of places like the Oakland Hills, like Berkeley, Albany, Alameda, right? You're going to see a lot of buyers that are going to be or Fremont, right? Fremont, a lot of tech employees live in Fremont. So which kind of leads me to another point. can't emphasize this enough. Real estate is hyper local, like literally hyper local. That's why whenever I read things about like Redfin or Zillow, I think national projections are pretty much useless. First of all, they're almost never right. Second of all, like what's happening in Florida isn't happening in California, but even like within the Bay Area, it's really different, right? So, Berkeley, for example, right? A couple things that happen in Berkeley. Berkeley moves pretty quick, average of like 10 to 14 days on market, and the typical sales price to list price ratio, or list price to sales price, whatever, what you list a property for versus what it actually ends up selling for, that difference is always about 25, 30%, which if you don't know that going into that market as a buyer or a seller, you're going to get caught off guard. Versus we go to Brentwood. Brentwood's complete opposite. Days on market right now are like 45. And even in the heat of the market, I think the highest list price or sales price to list ratio was like 7 to 10%. So it was always a milder market. So understanding what's happening locally. And I just had a listing in Richmond, 800 Sonoma Street in Richmond, which is in East Richmond Heights. So when you think Richmond, you think blue collar, not, super highly desirable, but East Richmond Heights is actually different, completely different clientele up there. So
because you're kind of on, that's like the border of El Cerrito Hills, right? Like I have a friend that lives up there, and beautiful house. I just never really explored that area until recently. I'm like, this is great. He bought that house, a few years ago for like $800K, so like under $1 million in the Bay Area with a view of the Bay. I'm like, this is a great spot.
Yeah. So that listing we came on market at I think 1.1, no, not quite, $1,050,000. I knew that the price difference, the normal price difference between list and sales price was about 30%. And we nailed it. It was exactly 30% over the list price. We went pending in like 11 days. So really desirable part of Richmond. So I can't emphasize that enough. Like real estate is hyper local. So even for someone listing in Oakland, like Jesus, Oakland's a good example, right? West Oakland, East Oakland, Piedmont, the Oakland Hills, they're like different cities, right? So it's just very, very
cool. So we only have a few minutes left here, maybe 5-ish. Sherwin, you got a couple more things you want to hit on before we wrap this thing up? I feel like our conversations always go super quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I can quickly say, we listed the house for like 4 weeks on the market, and we sort of took away the open houses and left it on the MLS for another 2 weeks. So 6 weeks total. We got no offers, but, we got some offers that they were negotiating that they were going to, offer way under list price. And I just said, don't bother it. And we decided what we did was that we just decided to pull it off the market for the time being. And it's funny because a couple of things happened when we pulled it off the market, which I didn't know was going to happen. And maybe so you could talk more of this. So the minute we pulled it off the market, I got like hammered with calls and emails from other agents saying, hey, Sherwin, we noticed that your house on blah, 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 blah just got listed out the market. Are you looking for another agent to sell it? We can guarantee to sell it, blah, blah, this, that. We got it was just bombarded. Even my mom got calls back home in Hawaii. I don't know how they got my mom's number in Hawaii, but they do. And my mom's saying, yeah, these agents in Oakland are asking me about your house in Oakland if you want to sell it. And I don't know. It was just, I don't know. Maybe there's there's like a bat signal that gets signed out like, hey, new listing, and everyone starts calling you and everything like that.
There's a lot of services that will do that. There's one that's pretty popular amongst realtors called Vulcan 7.
That is quite the name for a product, by the way.
It was like it was like I have in my notes. It was like vultures of real estate agents. Just my notes right there. It's right there. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
So we get alerted. We get alerted daily when properties come off the market for any reason. I mean, you're seeing a lot more of that, right? Now you have a relationship with your aunt, but if you had hired someone that you didn't have a good relationship with and you didn't have a good experience and you didn't trust them, another agent calls you and they offer you a better value proposition, then you're like, yeah, I had a bad experience with the first agent. I'll take another. I still have to sell this house.
Yeah.
So it's effective. And so when yours went canceled when it canceled, I have no doubt you got bombarded.
Oh yeah, it's funny. So another thing that happened when I pulled it off the market was there was some buyer's remorse from buyers who were interested in the house, and they still wanted to make an offer even though we unlisted because I was prepping it for rental, and we're like, we're not going to stop prepping it for rent. But what happened was I think their agents was sort of advising them, let's not make an offer yet. It's going to be on the market. They're going to lower the price, and then let's make an offer. But the problem is we didn't lower the price. We just pulled it off. We said, nope, we're just going to rent it. And people were like, wait, we really like your house. We want to make an offer. Why'd you put it off? I was like, well, there was no offers. And my whole thing was like, make an offer, give us something to react to. And we told this one interested buyer, because they want us to like stop. They want to go have the wife go check it out and this and that. We're like, we're not going to hold work. If you want us to put off the rental market, get into escrow, and then you can go see the house. This shows how serious you are. And what happened was they didn't make an offer, so it wasn't serious. So glad we didn't do that, because then we would have wasted like a week or two just fumbling around, negotiating back and forth. So, but then, and yeah, sorry, yeah.
No, I thought you were running down. I was going to say, for buyer's agents, like, just shoot your shot. It's the worst that can happen.
That's I don't
know why so many people are afraid to do that. Just shoot your shot.
I know. Like, I mean, we do it in offers. We put something on paper, so it gives them something to react to. Yeah. And I guess maybe they're thinking, well, I was talking to the agent, and we don't want it to be an insult if it's a lowball offer or something like that, right? I mean, you know how it is there. It's like, you're like, oh, we don't want to insult the seller, and they're not going to accept it. So why am I going to waste my time writing up an offer? But I'm like, dude, it takes like, I mean, how long does it take to write up an offer? Does it take days? Does it take weeks? No.
Like, once you've done it a bunch, you set up certain templates, 15 minutes.
Exactly. So then I've been hearing like in the beginning of the week, oh, we're going to have 3 offers, and nothing came through. I'm like, do I make offers all the time? It doesn't take that long to make an offer. But then the last thing that happened that we realized when we pulled it off, and this is probably the most important thing was, and you kind of alluded earlier, was reality kind of hit my wife and I, where as a seller, we can't get top value in our house in the timing that we're accustomed to in the past few years. We listed that house. We're like, oh, we're going to a week or two done. Yeah. We're getting an offer sold in less than a month. No, buyers out there got to be prepared now to have their house listed there for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe a couple months. And that's how it used to be back in the day, right? Houses were on the market a lot longer. And like you said, real estate is hyper local here in the Bay Area. We're just so spoiled and used to this whole all cash offers in a week or two, boom, done. So, but yeah, those are sort of like the things with us. And just to find the outcome, we got a renter in like a week or two.
Yeah.
Because there's still rental demand here, and we got a renter there. Although we can't get the equity that we wanted, tax free. We do have a HELOC, and we did cash out refinances and all that stuff. So there's other strategies to kind of extract the equity, but that's sort of like my home selling experience during this crazy time. So,
yeah. So Ernesto, before we kind of really wrap this thing up, I'm curious if there's any last thoughts or advice that you're giving the clients now, or any insights on the market right now, or just what's kind of going through your mind these days in terms of, obviously you're an agent, you've worked on the buying side, the selling side. What are you seeing now, or what are some big themes that you're telling clients?
I mean, I always lead with data. One of the things I tell people to do is don't focus so much on what properties are listed for, focus on what they actually sell for. So anybody can do this. You go into Redfin, right? If you know your max budget is, I don't know, 600, and you need 3 bedrooms and you need 2 bathrooms, and you're not willing to drive more than an hour. Okay, so let's look at where things are selling at what you're looking for, because that's where you're going to have the highest probability. Affordability has definitely been impacted, but you can get your offers accepted with first-time home buyer programs, maybe less desirable loan types that were hard to get your offers accepted with. And people need to have this is a long-term thing. Like, if you think you're going to stay in your home for 2-3 years, or you're going to move in your house now and it's immediately going to be cheaper than renting, like, this probably isn't for you. And so finding their true motivation is super duper important. But one thing that we just touched on is, like, let's just shoot our shot. Let's see what happens. Because right now there's a lot of sellers that are just desperate to unload certain properties. And the fact of the matter is, you just never know. What I do know is that there's a lot less competition by and large. So it doesn't hurt to shoot your shot. For sellers, I'm a big believer in taking as few shortcuts as we can. Obviously, not every improvement is going to give you a dollar for dollar, return on your investment. Like, we're not going to swap out carpet for brand new hardwood floors. Like, that is it's a crazy investment that's probably not going to make us huge a difference. Maybe we do laminate flooring, but coat of paint, makes a huge difference. SF Gate put out an article about 3 months ago that gave a lot of credibility to the staging industry. So, staging used to be like a gimmick, and people didn't understand like the purpose of it. But like when you walk into a home, the way you feel is going to impact whether or not you're going to write on that offer. And I actually did a case study on my Instagram where there were 2 identical units, like the same unit in a townhouse. And one of them was actually, I thought, a nicer unit. They had removed the popcorn ceiling. They had better floors. They had more expensive cabinetry. They had redone the bathroom. It was a better unit, but it wasn't staged. And the photos were clearly off of somebody's phone. I know we have a minute left. And we had another identical unit that had less quality finishes. They didn't invest nearly as much. It still had the popcorn ceiling. That one was staged. It had beautiful photography, and that one ended up selling. So, like, I can't think of a better example to just remind sellers that you don't have to break the bank, but a coat of paint, proper staging, really good photos, those 3 things alone will make a huge impact.
Love it, man. With the last 30 seconds, can you tell everyone where we can find you, Ernesto, or contact you?
Yeah, you guys can give me a call. My phone number is 650-288-2082. I've had that number for 15 years, so it is a San Mateo area code. And I'm on Instagram at Bay Area Homes by Nest.
NEST, love it.
Nice.